Well, welcome to the first part of our two-part webinar on hiring and retaining supply chain professionals in a competitive environment. Part 2 will be next Wednesday, November 3rd at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And over the next 40 minutes as we present, we ask that you submit your questions in the chat. They will be addressed as part of a Q&A session with the three presenters at the end of today's webinar. If you registered for the webinar, at the end of this series, you'll receive a link to the 2021 Supply Chain Hiring Guide. As part of your registration, you've already received an email containing your 3 free job listings that you can use on our job board at supplychaincareers.com. Now let's meet your presenters.
All right, thanks everybody for joining today. My name is Rodney Apple. Going to do some introductions real quick, and then we're going to get into the agenda and the meat of this webinar. This is part 1 of part 2, as Mike said. So again, Rodney Apple, my background is on this 3-member team here. Is I'm the recruiting and guy. I've been in recruitment for about 25 plus years, focused at the professional and executive level. For the last, let's say 21, 22 years, I've been 100% specialized in end-to-end supply chain. So that spans all the core functions. I've filled over 1,000 different professional and executive roles across all facets of supply chain operations and the like. My first half of that 20 years was in corporate with some companies you'll know, starting out with the Home Depot at their headquarters, leading their supply chain logistics recruitment. From there, I went to the Coca-Cola Company for about 7 years and led all of their recruitment as well for manufacturing operations, logistics, strategic sourcing, procurement, and the other core functions, followed by Kimberly-Clark Corporation and then Cummins. And then the last half, I've been building out a boutique search firm that specialized in supply chain. In addition to that, for 7 years, I served as the supply chain career coach for ASCM, the Association for Supply Chain Management, formerly known as APIX, also contributing to their magazine SCM Now under the professional development category. Over to you, Mike.
And I'm Mike Ogle. I'm a co-founder of the company Supply Chain Careers and also on the full-time faculty of the Supply Chain Management program at the Business College at Appalachian State University. Now, previously, I've held positions at 2 leading supply chain associations, MHI and ASCM. Plus, I've been on the full-time faculty member of 4 different universities, primarily in industrial engineering, with a focus on supply chain and manufacturing operations. My PhD is from Arizona State University in industrial engineering. To you, Hinesh. Hinesh, you may be on mute.
Oh, sorry about that. Welcome, everyone. Glad to be here. So my background is mainly in 3 parts. My first part of the career was as an engineer and leading operations, eventually leading full P&Ls of operating businesses. I did a lot of my early work at Eaton Corporation and Honeywell. Then eventually I moved into a second phase of my career where I did a lot of corporate strategy, portfolio strategy, M&A growth. I did that some at Honeywell as well as at Hillenbrand. And then the third part of my career was almost 10 years at Aegon Zender, which is a tier 1 global senior level executive recruitment firm based out of Zurich. I was based in the Chicago office. I led the U.S. supply chain practice for a couple of years, and then for 4 or 5 years, I co-led the U.S. and North American chemicals practice, chemicals and process industry. And this is mainly for recruiting senior level talent, vice president up through board of directors. I'm also a co-founder of Supply Chain Careers along with Rodney and Mike. Glad to be here.
Now I was on mute. This webinar is brought to you by Supply Chain Careers. It's your career-long hub for learning about and advancing supply chain careers. We serve professionals, students, and employers, and we help employers build superior teams through in-depth articles in our content hub and a podcast covering supply chain career stories and advice, plus a job board that's dedicated just to supply chain careers where you can use your 3 free job postings. Please visit us at supplychaincareers.com.
Yeah, our sister company, SCM Talent Group, which I founded back in 2004 when I started doing my corporate stints in supply chain recruitment. We're basically a boutique, national in scope, United States, end-to-end supply chain recruitment company. We focus at the professional and the executive level, offering retained executive recruitment services as well. We're fairly industry agnostic. I'm sticking to my roots where we focus mainly with manufacturing companies, retailers, wholesale distributors, as well as logistics and supply chain service providers. You can check us out at scmtalent.com.
All right, well, let's get started with our agenda. We want to be able to talk to you about the pain that employers are feeling now and that shortage of supply chain talent, but we're also going to provide you with a variety of ways to be able to deal with it and to be able to up your game. So things like an employer branding strategy, turning your organization into talent scouts, developing a referral program, and also being able to create a supply chain leadership development program, which is a critical component of what you'll try to do is improving your company's options for your employees. And then also to talk about mentorship and the hiring process. At the end, we'll also have a Q&A, so please, a reminder that you'll have those questions that you could submit in the chat, and we'll answer them at the end. So first of all, part of what we wanted to talk about was the pain that employers are feeling. Employers are facing one of the greatest challenges that they've had in decades. Many of you have probably felt this. Supply chain talent has been more difficult to find, hire, and retain. It's made it more difficult to grow your businesses, and for some to even maintain the current level of business. The news is filled with phrases like the Great Resignation that you see on the screen that focus on people leaving their jobs. And for some, they are leaving the workforce entirely. For many, they're really just seeking new opportunities. They're either moving to other companies or to other industries, and they may even be in new locations. They may be turning to work that they can do remotely, making the problem more like the Great Migration. So how do you get more people to migrate to your company? Well, that's become part of the Great Renegotiation. The balance of power has definitely shifted for the workers, resulting in the need to not just provide more compensation and a more promising path up the ladder, but also to provide greater flexibility in where to work, plus a variety of other options. Rodney, what are you seeing in your searches for supply chain professionals at SCM Talent Group?
Yeah, Mike, it's absolutely flipped 180 degrees from last year where, our business kind of went off the roof for a bit, searches went on hold. Everybody's panicking, trying to figure out what to do with the pandemic. Candidates that are shedding, they're shedding millions and millions of jobs. We all saw this in the news, of course, and now it's really the complete opposite. We're seeing unprecedented demand for talent. There's always been a bit of a talent gap in supply chain. A lot of it is just from having bad PR is a great place to work, of course. So that created more of a generational gap. Supply chain continued to explode in growth, evolving from a technology perspective. And the jobs have changed and evolved as a result. When I started 20 years ago, there were about 6 universities offering supply chain and related programs. I think we counted recently maybe up to 150, give or take. So that just shows that there's being a big emphasis on bringing more up-and-comers into this marketplace, but there's still that generational gap that exists today. And some of the things that I've been seeing, from talking to different, hiring managers across all industries, company shapes and sizes, is really that they're losing people. So you talked about the great retention. We've got baby boomers, retiring in droves, and so that's creating some void there at that mid-management level. And one thing that's really people don't really talk about, we've lost, unfortunately, a lot of lives to COVID, and then there's the long COVID. I even have a friend that's going through this right now. He's lost a lot of stamina and just having issues with keeping focus. And so a lot of people are experiencing that. I don't think we know the real numbers there, but I think there's a big impact there in terms of people being in the workforce. And then another big thing that we're not talking about is all of these people that lost jobs, everybody started new jobs. And so when that happens, a big piece of the labor pool starts a new job where they're going to have their head down and they're not going to be looking for new employment. So you have that, and all of this together is really creating this perfect storm where all of these factors and disruptions have collided at the exact same time. It's causing mayhem, and it's all across all industry sectors, all company sizes. I don't think anyone is safe, from being poached and so forth. And it's just led to this major talent crisis. So we're going to try to share some of our best ideas, and so you can get out in front of this and try to course correct and find some solutions that might help you.
So also, we wanted to be able to provide a little bit about the magnitude of the problem. And as you see on the slide in the top center, according to Deloitte, it is 2.4 million positions that are unfilled between 2018 and 2028. Now, naturally, all the accelerated disruptions and the changes that were brought on by COVID likely accelerated some of those later years forward. That's resulted in an accelerated need for new talent. So although there's been a surge of enrollments in supply chain related programs, an article by Elementum shows that the ratios of demand to supply are possibly anywhere from 6-to-1 or possibly 9-to-1. So those enrollments obviously aren't keeping up with that demand. And a survey published by the Predictive Index reported that in the past year, 48% of employees have thought about changing careers. And more importantly, 57% are thinking about leaving their company in the next 12 months. That's a huge problem. So what are some of the symptoms that we end up seeing? Well, it is that shift in power. So when talent is in high demand and that demand is growing, it shouldn't be a surprise that people are becoming more demanding about pay or responsibility, flexible working hours, perks, benefits, and a variety of other factors. Some work that employees previously said could not be performed unless it was face-to-face was forced to be remote. What that did was invite innovative ways to prove that it could happen simply because it had to happen. That's resulted in the workforce realizing that employment rules could and should flex in ways that could work to the benefit of the employee and the employer. A recent Wall Street Journal article also stated that 80% of supply chain professionals prefer to work remote 3 days a week. So given those supply and demand types of issues, new hires are getting greater compensation and benefits, leading them to make other similar types of demands. They don't just want more pay and benefits. They want to grow. They want to develop new capabilities. And they want a career path, whether it's technical career path or whether it's in leadership. So they're also looking for companies that share their values. With the expectations for ESG and other ways of positioning the company for the good of society. They're also looking for companies, and supply chain disruptions have thankfully made supply chain much more visible, but many still don't understand it beyond ports, and warehouses, and factories. What that's done is create a need to clearly show how attractive the variety of work in supply chain can be, and that it's not just jobs in dirty or dingy types of environments. As those expectations continue to grow, are you ready to provide supply chain talent with an attractive position or career path? Let's dive into some of the steps that you need to take to strengthen your ability to hire and retain supply chain talent, starting with the need to build a supply chain branding strategy. Hinesh?
All right, thanks, Mike. So now let's kind of get into the meat of things for the audience here. What can you do about it? You kind of saw there is a problem. I think that's probably not news to most of you, but what do we do now? One of the first places to consider starting is a branding strategy. What is your brand? Know it. What's your brand definition? Marketing comes as a next step. So you have to define that before you go out and market roles and market the company. Think about how to work forward from the type of roles you have out to the candidates, and think about how the brand will also work backward from the market of candidates into you. What can you offer? Where, how, why? Which candidates do you want to target? How do you want to connect with them? What are the messages you want to send to the candidate pool that is your target? Because you don't want all the talent. You want the talent that's the best fit for what you need. Another way to think about this, as you think about brand, if you're not so familiar with it, is to look at what your competitors are doing. See what the best in the world are doing. It doesn't matter. You can go look at Amazon, you can go look at Goldman, you can look at a host of organizations to see what they're doing, and it may spur some ideas. of how they're communicating their brand. So, as you think about it, look how accurately to describe your organization, the culture of the company, the history, what are the career paths, what are the benefits of working here. A lot of organizations, they tend to have inconsistent brands across the organization. So sometimes you go to one place. Whoops, I think we lost our feed here for a moment on the video. So yeah, there we go. So, a great place to begin is your company values. And what you probably don't want to do is regurgitate them just as they are, but think about them and shape them into an image that you think will resonate with the audience. Talk to your marketing company. Oftentimes marketing departments are very good at this, and they may have done some of this already as part of their normal marketing work. So that's a way to think about how to unify and define the brand strategy as it relates to the talent you're after. It's a different take on it versus working with customers or clients, etc. So some information you may want in your brand is, okay, what is your company's vision? If you have a tagline that makes sense or a brand positioning that makes sense, consider incorporating that. Employee testimonials are always good if they're well done. So when someone talks about why this is a great place to work, someone who truly enjoys it, get a clip or two of them on your web page. Break down your supply chain into departments so candidates can get a view on, okay, here are the different types of jobs. And of course, that should link to where your talent needs and talent gaps are. You don't want to draw people in and not have the right positions available. After you've kind of done that, the next step might be to think about how do you upgrade or create a career website. That's one of the primary, perhaps the primary way candidates are researching your company. So think about how to optimize those career web pages. You want to make it easier for candidates to find your company. So whether that's being promoted outside, whether that's once they get on your website, being able to find where the jobs or the career section is on your website. Think about how the path is to your information and making sure you get the right people there and that it's easy to find it. Feature the benefits of working for your company or your firm. And a very quick way for them to see those opportunities and apply. So make it easy for them to see what you need and to apply. Otherwise, they won't. It's not their responsibility to dig around a lot. In this current environment, it's our responsibility representing the employers to make those options available and to be front and forward, and especially in a very tight market like we have right now. Think about your audience. Develop as you think about your audience, it's a good idea to think about it as a person, like you're talking to an individual. For example, if you're trying to get a logistics person, you want to speak logistics language. So they use certain terms and definitions and incorporate those keywords. So it might be transportation, it might be warehousing, it might be software simulations, those types of things that they would pick up and say, okay, I can do that, or that makes sense. I understand the job. So that's why it's a good idea to focus on the type of person, a specific individual that you're after. And you don't want to go overly custom, but do think about how to attract and retain that person's interest and hopefully get them to apply to the right job. Again, this is also a good place to collaborate with your marketing department on the design of that page, especially if you're in HR or talent and you're developing this, or you might be a line leader, leading an operation or a business. Think about what you want to work with HR and marketing on to get this started if you don't have one. We talked a little bit about testimonials, but this is a specific place where testimonials from top performers can be useful. Embed those videos, embed some quotes with pictures of people on the actual career pages so that people can see, oh, okay, I can see there's a real person in that role, and this is what they have to say. It does help people relate to themselves in that role. And you want people to envision themselves in that role. That helps them get excited about the opportunity. have people speak about key projects that they've completed, how they've driven value for the organization, how they've had opportunity to do different things, especially people who are upwardly mobile top performers who've gotten promotions and additional responsibility. Other top performers will look at that and say, hey, maybe that could be me, or I'd like to do that. And then once you've got their interest, now you've got your brand, you've gotten them to the site, you've gotten their interest. Now, boom, it's time for the call to action. So set up that call to action so that it's easy for them to actually access the job listings, number one, and number two, to upload their resume to your database and or apply to a specific position. So they have to see the jobs and they have to be able to apply to a job, or they have to be able to upload their resume to your general database so that hopefully it can be matched to a good opportunity. And as you're presenting the jobs, make sure that the job descriptions are reasonably well optimized, especially in this tight market. If you want to attract the right talent, there should be a good description. It shouldn't be just, endless list of bullets of this person has to do all these wonderful things. A little bit of storytelling helps there too. So the person can understand the key objectives of the role. What would this role accomplish in the first year or two? And how would it benefit that candidate's career? That should be in there, because don't forget, you're not just asking for them to contribute, you're asking for them to see themselves applying, and why should they do it? It's got to be a bit of screening for skills and experiences, but also marketing the opportunity. If it makes sense, consider having those job postings have images, infographics, other things there to make it kind of interesting and a little more modern feeling, and so that they feel like they get a better sense of the role and what it's like to work there. So this is all about developing that brand strategy. Now, if we go on to the next section, which is a second set of activities after you've kind of developed the brand strategy and started communicating that, you've got it posted, you're getting some traffic. How else can you augment to that? Because that's somewhat of a passive strategy. There may be some advertising, which is active, but what can you do beyond that? Well, one thing that's clear to leverage is your entire organization. Your organization is undoubtedly connected through suppliers, through channel partners, through customers or clients, through any number of organizations they may be part of. So let's focus on how to scout for talent using that larger organization, because the best organizations do have a strong brand and they leverage the larger organization to get that amplified through a larger megaphone. One way to do it, which is tried and true, but it is still important, is to sponsor employees to become parts of associations or go to conferences. If you're in a leadership role, or even if you're in HR in a support function, consider encouraging a budget to get people to pay for these, to have the company pay for them to attend these, or to be in a part of a chapter. Could be national, could be global. It really depends on what makes sense for the business as well as for recruitment. Oftentimes, just the education and exposure is worth it. It's usually a day or 2 or 3 of time, which is not inordinate, and it's not usually crazy expensive. So they'll usually get a lot of talent development, personal development, professional development out of it, but they can also produce a pipeline of referrals. You can generate a pretty strong return on investment if this is done in a surgical, well-planned manner. You want to create an incentive as well for the right positions. And you probably have heard about these, and they're not that hard to do, but it's amazing for some of the most difficult to fill positions, ones that are critical, that people don't leverage the larger organization. And many times it doesn't take a lot of money to generate. If you consider the time and effort it takes, if you go third-party recruitment or even in-house recruitment, if you count up the number of hours and effort it's a huge effort to go find someone. It's also important to leverage the organization because someone may know someone, and it can be very efficient for some of these positions. So think about that for your high need, difficult positions or urgent needs. Another thing you may want to consider doing is just basically giving some of the talent scouting a little bit of background. So when someone goes to an event as part of talent acquisition or HR, or even if you are head of multiple facilities, you may want to think about what positions do I need that are critical. And every time a person goes to an event, it could be virtual in this environment, but certainly as we get into next year, it may be in person. Think about, okay, well, they're going to let's say it's a warehouses equipment or supply chain equipment symposium. Well, there may be all kinds of people that make garage doors and dock doors and conveying equipment and all sorts of things, software. What kind of people would be at that you might need in your organization? And how might you encourage the right people attending to work the room, to break the ice, to build a rapport? How might you help them think about who to talk to, how to talk to them? Some people may be more comfortable, some people may be less comfortable. They may not know who to talk to, and they may be very open, but they may not know, oh, well, you need a manager of such and such logistics. And now at least they know what to look for. So, I've even seen a company or two that actually has a video on there about how someone goes to a conference, and part of their role is also to scout for talent and how they talk to someone to understand what they do. And if it makes sense, at least get their business card, take that thought away and bring it back to HR. So these would be great to think of in the same way that you might think of in a recruiting event. Maybe not as exclusively focused as a pure recruiting event, but that type of thinking. So think about the MBA recruiting or college recruiting. Those things are very useful as well, or masters in operations, et cetera. So this is a part of that type of thinking. So of course you should do the academic route recruiting, and do consider that, but train those people just like you're training, just like we're asking you to train the people that go to conferences and symposiums. And afterwards, reach out to the candidates, talk to them, have HR or the hiring manager follow up with ones if there's any high potentials or any very attractive candidates. You can also review the agenda. Many times they will send out a list of attendees. You can review them on social media before you go. So this goes for whether you're recruiting undergraduates, whether you're recruiting graduate students that might have work experience like in an MBA, but it also goes for industry events. You can oftentimes at the very least see the companies that are coming. So that gives an idea of which booth might I stop by and at least talk to some of the people. And then make sure you have a proper debrief afterwards. Ask the people. It takes a little while to develop these. So I think those are the key things for talent scouts. And I'll turn it over to Rodney to talk a little bit about employee referral.
Thanks, Hinesh. That was great. Yeah, basically in this kind of market, what we're suggesting is that you have to make recruiting a team sport. You can't just rely on your talent acquisition department. I've seen so many companies that structure these where, do less or do less and they shrink it down and underinvest. And so, you've got to get the organization actively involved when it relates. This is networking. And having them talk about your company, your brand, what it's like to work there. That's what we talked about there. And then, tagging along with this, many companies have employee referral programs. When I worked at Coke Home Depot, we all had those, and they were fairly robust. We had great technology to facilitate those referrals as well. But this is traditionally your number one source or channel for applicants. And if you've got a very strong program, you may not need to even put as much emphasis and effort into some of these other ideas and tactics that we're referring to, especially like with advertising or outsourcing to recruitment firms as well, like ours at SEM Talent Group. And that can actually translate into some cost savings as well when you're not having to to spend money on resources. So these two programs, when combined, one's more network outreach oriented, one is more, leveraging referrals across the whole company. They can be very powerful. They vary from company to company, though, and based on company size, organizational structure, things like that. And but it is a proven way to improve your applicant flow. And honestly, what I've seen is that you tend to get some pretty high quality referrals coming through the door, because no one wants to refer, someone that's not that great, and then they have their name attached to that individual. So from my experience, this should be your number one source. If it's not, you probably have some work to do, and it could involve employer branding and fixing some other things on the inside to make your company an attractive place to work. But before you start any type of referral program, implementation wise, or whether you're planning on improving it, you certainly want to carve out a clear vision of what you're trying to gain and accomplishment. And obviously, the ultimate goal is to improve the quantity of applicants as well as the quality. And nobody wants to have a bunch of people coming in that aren't a right fit that you have to sift through. So if you can get some high quality referrals, that's great. I did this in my organization at Coke and Home Depot. I'd walk the aisles when I was banging my head against the wall looking for candidates, and I would seek out referrals. Open your phone, give me a name of someone I can call, and that's what you need to do in this kind of marketplace. But you're going to want to ask yourself some questions. What are the top hiring challenges? We know just getting people into ads is not working, and even direct sourcing, reaching out sometimes, that takes a little longer than it used to before this crisis. What are the talent gaps that exist within the organization? Where do you have the highest turnover? That might be where you put some additional emphasis to generate some referrals to handle those tough to fill areas, if you will. Get very specific about your goals, put in some hard numbers. You want to build awareness throughout the company of what you're trying to accomplish, so your associates understand what the goals are, where you have gaps, and they can work together to try to overcome those gaps. You may want to have, depending on the size of your company, small companies, you don't need to go invest in all this technology, but large companies, it can be cumbersome to track. So think about a referral tracking system where, and keep it simple. You don't want to stand up anything that's complicated to use, where you have to go through a series of courses to learn. The less steps they have to make the referral, the better. And then just having some kind of a system that tracks every phase: who made the referral, where's the candidate at in the process, did they get the job or not? That's important, and you want to get that information back to the person that referred. A few tools you may want to consider, and if for some reason you don't capture these, feel free to shoot me a note, rodney.apple@supplychaincareers.com. So the one we used over, I forget, it was Coke or somewhere else, was JobVite. It's very popular. They've been around, I'd say, at least 15 or so years. So it's kind of an ATS that allows for the pushing out of jobs. You can attach user licenses to your employees, and they can have visibility into the roles that are open, and then they can push those out to their network through social, email, and things like that. These tools are all kind of similar in functionality. Getambassador.com, Referral Rock, Xtole, EXTOLE. These are a few systems that you may want to look at to ramp up and sort of automate a portion of your referral program. You absolutely want to train your workforce. This is critical. People should understand how they should go about making referrals. What qualifications are you looking for? What does success look like in these roles? What leadership traits are you looking for? What kind of cultural fit? Putting together a fact sheet too is important. We always had those in my corporate days, where we could send something out to candidates that were prospecting, gives you a great overview of the company and what it's like to work there, the core values. Might include, from a supply chain perspective, the core departments, functions, the supply chain operational footprint, and details like that. And what they can expect after they refer. Will they be notified? Is there going to be an incentive program? I've seen programs that are highly successful without having a monetary incentive. Provide that feedback, though. It's critical. Recognition, rewards. It could mean, someone gets up in front of a town hall or on a Zoom call these days and recognizes someone that made some great referrals into the organization. So make sure you've got the right feedback mechanism and loops in place. And then, like I said earlier, keep your employees up to date on their referrals. The most frustrating thing that I heard about, from feedback in my corporate days was that I would submit somebody and I would never hear what happened. And sometimes they would call me and wonder what happened as well. And that's just not good. They're not going to be inclined to continue referring people if they go into a black hole. That's why it's so critical to get those feedback mechanisms in place, whether you have a manual process or using one of these tools to help facilitate the referral program. And you don't have to do anything big on the incentives. I worked at one company. I think they were giving away a BMW at the end of the year for the most referrals. But you could do that, and guess what? It costs a lot more to go out and invest and hire, search firms and things like that where you pay fees. So it could be small awards, $50 gift cards for each referral. You could even have a point system. I've seen those where you get X amount of points for referrals. If they get higher, maybe there's a bigger number of points and so forth. And at the end of the year, they have a reward system where they can cash in potential like days off or gift cards, a trip, things of that nature. But you want to make sure you're measuring this too. Adjust where you need to. What percentage of your hires are coming from the referral channel? How many are receiving responses? You want to maybe bake in some surveys to see what their experience was throughout the process, and so forth. So make sure you're tracking the results. That way you can figure out if you've got some areas for improvement, put in some corrective action plans, and then close those gaps.
All right. So another thing that can be done is develop a leadership development program. There's so much on this, so I think I'll just touch on the high points here. I think it's fairly straightforward why someone would want to do this. It does two things. It attracts higher quality talent, and really it aims to increase their development. So get better talent in and develop it better. Some other things that it can do is attract top graduates from targeting universities. Allows for promotions from within versus looking outside your organization. All number of good primary and secondary benefits. So it seems kind of daunting if you don't have one. If you have one, how do you improve it? But if you don't have one, I'd say crawl, walk, run. It doesn't take a lot to get started, and you can improve it as you go along. So do think about starting one, even if it's pretty modest at first. It's better than having nothing. So what do you do first? You define what you're looking for in a leader, as well as you establish program goals. So what are you looking for, and the goals. And what are you looking for is really, what does a strong leader look like in your supply chain organization? And take some time to think through that. Take some time to talk with the operating leaders to write that down. And there may be skills like operational excellence. It may be business leadership, talent development. It may be strategic planning. Whatever you think is necessary to kind of draw a picture of that. Because if you don't have a picture of it that's generally well understood and shared, it's difficult to develop someone towards a goal if you don't know where you're shooting. Another thing that you can do is benchmark organizations. Now that you kind of know what you're looking for, go benchmark organizations. And you don't have to go into them. You can kind of look at them from the outside, because many of them advertise their development program. So you can get a fair bit of information. This is not an area with very little codified. There are a lot of things. All you have to do is a quick search, and you can find examples of best-in-class organizations. You can find tools. You can find frameworks, etc. You can look at companies like Amazon or Microsoft or Honeywell that have, well, it depends on which industry you're interested in, that have well-recognized and successful programs. So do benchmark and look broadly. You want to think about this cross-functionally a little bit, so that it's not just one person owning it or one department. You do see occasionally sometimes where HR will take a lead role in it. But it does make sense to include the operating units. It does make sense to include a couple of different levels. If you can get senior executive sponsorship, that would be good as well. And then now that you kind of have a team leading it, you've got the goals, you've got kind of what you're looking for, then you develop a framework of what actually is the program. So what are we going to do? Or what types of projects will a leadership candidate be in? What types of training will they get? What are the length of the rotations if you're going to do 6-month or 1-year projects, or different roles if they're coming out of school, or maybe it's one for middle management that's training to be a senior executive. How do you do that? And then also communicating points around it. So how will you communicate this, especially if it's going to be a larger program at a larger company where you've got dozens, potentially hundreds of people at the mid and lower levels in this program. So think about how you want to actually establish the framework, the communication, etc. And then one thing you may want to do is to develop a mentor-mentee pair. And these things, these things are like human relationships. Sometimes you can assign a mentor. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes it's just like friendships; they don't work out. So have a mechanism for people to do some adjusting later, so that these mentor-mentee pairs are beneficial for the whole group. And some people are just better at it, and some people know how to communicate and develop talent. So think about people like that really have talent as a passion of theirs, and development as a passion. Not everyone does. And then finally, what I'd say about this is, it's what I started with: crawl, walk, run. Start, and if you're already up to speed, you can always be better. But if you're starting early, just start with a modest one. Think about, okay, how can we improve it 6 months or a year from now? And how can you evaluate the performance of the program and keep developing it? So it'll get better, and these things typically pay very good dividends as time goes on.
All right, Hinesh, you touched on mentorship, and we know from our Supply Chain Careers podcast, everybody we talk to takes this extremely seriously. So, how can this help when it comes to hiring and attracting talent? And what it does is, you've got a strong program. You can put it into your employer branding. You can have, it signals to applicants that you take personal and professional development very seriously. So it helps to attract. Obviously, it helps to develop. That's really the core purpose. But it also helps to retain talent as well. They're going to build more key relationships throughout the organization. Hopefully, they're going to help them be more successful in terms of navigating the company waters. And we feel like that'll help with retention. I mean, it does. I've seen it before. So I'm going to quickly go through this, so we'll have time for Q&A. But clearly, with a mentorship program, you want to establish the core objectives and the guidelines. What do you want to get out of it? What are the significant challenges from a talent perspective? Who's going to participate? How long will the mentorships last? Things of that nature. I always recommend having someone that's like a steering committee or a program coordinator, so they can kind of manage these in this program. It doesn't have to be a full-time job. Maybe in a large corporation it is, but typically it's someone in HR. You want to make sure you've got involvement, not just within the supply chain organization, but across other key functional areas, especially stakeholders that you engage within the company. Also, supply chain is so expansive. You got the operations piece. And in corporate, I always felt like there was a rub. Oh, you're a corporate. Oh, you're in the plant. So if you can get some cross-pollination of those two, from the field and the corporate and vice versa, from a mentorship, that can be extremely powerful. From there, you're going to set up your mentor-mentee pairing. Now, this is important to nail down. You're probably going to make mistakes here and there, and that's okay. But it can be in a group setting. It's typically one-on-one. Speaking of software, there's software for everything, but some companies do have software programs that help facilitate this, especially the large corporations. If you're smaller, you really don't need anything like that. But figure out what's going to be the best framework for your organization, and then make sure you've got some kind of a way to classify who would be a good mentor for what kind of mentees, and I would say vice versa, so you get a really strong relationship off the bat. And then, if you're a smaller company, like I said, a manual process will work just fine. You certainly want to communicate the expectations, what they're expected to get out of it, and also what they're not expected to get, such as special treatment or some kind of a promotion that would come after the mentorship. Clear understanding of the time commitment, the program guidelines, and then a strong mentor-mentee relationship, how it can help them grow and prosper within the organization. So nail down the framework. And as we've talked about throughout the series, if you're not measuring the results, you're going to have issues. So measure, seek out their feedback, both from the mentor, mentee, incorporate that back into the framework and make improvements. And that'll help you steadily and continuously improve as you move forward. Lastly, we're going to talk about the hiring process. And I've seen so many companies make mistakes over the years. But in this kind of marketplace where time kills all deals, it is imperative that you work on this and squeeze out those bottlenecks that add delays to hiring decisions and lead to a poor candidate experience as well. Big fan of the SWOT process: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. If you're not familiar, Google it. You can find the framework, and we've done these internally at our companies, and it really helps to figure out where you have opportunities for improvement. You're going to want to involve a cross-functional team, obviously your recruitment, your hiring manager, so you get both sides, your HR partners, and I would even, I would argue those that are, key to hiring decision makers that hire a lot of people so they can put in, add their input. Some things you want to think about: who does what throughout every aspect of the hiring process? Where do we have bottlenecks that create negative candidate experiences or increase that all-important time to fill metric? How are we kicking off searches? I've seen so many companies do this the wrong way. We feel like there's a right way to do this, and if you do it right, you're going to minimize making mistakes. How are we performing against our hiring objectives? Quality of hire, time to fill, offer to acceptance ratio. You figure out how well you're doing and where you need to make improvements. Is our interviewing process sufficient enough to quickly vet candidates? Do we have an approval process that helps us to move very quickly to both approve new requisitions and job offers? I've worked in companies where you have to get it's an act of Congress to get a signatures and to move things forward. If that's your process, you're going to have issues. So make sure you streamline that. So again, identify the bottlenecks, determine what the best and optimal interview process, especially in this sort of new normal that we're in. Everybody's doing video and things like that. The number of interviews too, can we bring someone in for one day versus scattering it out over 2 or 3 rounds of interviews? Again, time kills deals, streamline it. And I would even argue when you get towards the end of the process, you've got a finalist or two, maybe even have that offer package ready to hand to them or send to them as they're wrapping up their final interview. I've seen companies do that, and it certainly accelerates the process. Lastly, if you've got a continuous improvement team, if this is a big company or mid-sized company, or you've got all these step points, you may want to bring in a talent acquisition consultant or even a continuous improvement. We did that at Coca-Cola. Hired someone in to support Lean Six Sigma guy to support HR and talent acquisition, and he spent time with our team and squeezed out these bottlenecks and it made it a better candidate experience, and it helped us to move people quicker through the process. So that's kind of one last thing I almost forgot. Make sure that your employees, your hiring managers, I've seen wonderful interviewers in my corporate days, and I've seen those that really shouldn't have been on the interview panel. So you'd absolutely want to put some training together so they can, master that art of interviewing. And obviously, like we've been talking about, measure the results, what's working, survey the candidates. Did they have a great experience or not? And just steadily make improvements.
All right. Well, thank you all for attending part 1 of the webinar. You'll receive a copy of this webinar presentation in your email within 24 hours. And a reminder that we're going to be offering part 2 of this webinar. As you see on the screen, this will be held on Wednesday, November 2nd at 2 p.m. You're going to hear about many more ways for you to be able to boost your hiring and retaining capabilities, including how to conduct a workforce planning study, expanding your sourcing channels, and right-sizing your recruiting teams, plus how to best engage with associations and universities. So now let's begin the Q&A. We'll take your questions.
Yeah, so it looks like one came in. This looks like it's from an employer, and they're asking, what do you feel are critical aspects of an organization when attracting job seekers in today's world? I feel like Rodney and Hinesh, one of you guys could probably take that.
Yeah, I mean, I can give it a shot. So we've done a lot of recruitment work, and it is absolutely true that certain certain characteristics make it easier in today's environment to attract an individual. Um, and this is a little bit of a difficult question because you have to realize that different things attract different people. But if there were some patterns that are emerging, this flexibility in work environment, it is a big one. It has grown tremendously through the COVID time period, and we're seeing employees have a choice, and they're choosing flexibility as a very important factor in making their decision, relocation, how many days in the office, those types of things. Another one that we're seeing is the continuation of a strong mission or purpose of the organization. They want to feel connected to what the organization sees as their larger purpose, larger initiative, and how they contribute to that. So they want to know, okay, how do I connect with that? And then there are the tried and true, which don't go away, which are fair compensation. Compensation is important, and obviously it varies a bit based on cost of living and geography and level, but it is still important. It's maybe not the only thing anymore, but it is still very important. And then development, especially when you think about people who are mid to earlier career, they like to see a track record of development and so forth. And in supply chain, since they have choice, they are prioritizing these things a bit higher than they used to. Wages are going up. Flexibility is being increasingly requested by employees. Talent development pathways, responsibility increased pathways are being more asked for.
Yeah, and I would add, Hinesh, that's very solid, by the way. Just maintaining a progressive stance towards your not just your talent development and movement throughout the organization. I've seen many companies that are just kind of stuck in the mud, and they like, oh, well, you've got to be in this role for 3 years before you can even apply to another position. And so that's just not going to attract top performers. So you've got to maintain some fluidness, and you've really got to align around their goals and try to help them develop and move along at the pace they want to, as long as it fits within your operations and your expectations. But don't have any of these stuck in the mud, old school Neanderthal policies that really prohibit people from moving within the organization, but also moving laterally. P&G has a great track record of putting people from one function into another where they have like zero experience, rounding them out and then moving them on to the next one, so they become very solid general managers, and maintaining that general manager mindset.
Nice. Rodney, this one might be good for you. This person seems interested in SCM talent. They ask, how are the recruiters at SCM Talent Group adapting to the talent shortage?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's the top of my mind right now. And we're actually, we have a training session every month, and that's going to be our big topic tomorrow. It's creative problem solving, and we've got a lot of rich tools and resources, but we're working on everything from how can we either add new tools to find people, and especially to engage with people. We just added another marketing manager, and this individual is extremely strong from a copywriting and PR communications background. And so leveraging his expertise to just refine our communications. But yeah, it's been an interesting dynamic, and I've been through markets like this, but never like this. And so we're absolutely just trying to be a little bit more assertive, more aggressive, but having better communication and more follow-ups and using different tools and technology. We take that, we need to look under every rock approach, but that's how we're solving it. And then we're also in tandem with our clients. I'm telling our recruiters, over communicate. Don't go a week or two without an update. Let them know what we're seeing in the marketplace. Let them know what the challenges are. And then also being an advisor to our clients, because that's a lot of what we do. It's not just filling searches. So we're actually telling them, if they don't get feedback in a day or two, that's not good. So we're kind of putting more emphasis on, hey, have a streamlined process, have some flexibility, whether it be from the work location, work from home, compensation. You got to be able to bend somewhere and flex. It could be skills, qualifications. You may want to take somebody that's not quite in your industry. They're over here in this adjacent industry. So we're also advising our clients so we can, figure out what we need to do to creatively problem solve this together as partners.
Great answer. We've got time for maybe one more. This person asks, when do you believe supply chain talent will resume sustainable levels? Is it on the radar, or is it just kind of something deep into the future?
Yeah, I'll share my perspective. I've been, for years I was interviewed on, like end of the year, a lot of the publications and trade journals and supply chain, they do their predictions. And so I've been just kind of predicting that, it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. And here we are. Pandemic certainly like threw it into a whole nother gear of mayhem. But I really do feel like we're probably going to be in this pattern, unfortunately, for I don't know how long it's going to last, but I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. I do think things will start to calm down when we can get back on track with all the supply chain disruptions that are hitting every industry, all kinds of products, components, commodities, raw materials. It is just widespread, but I really think we're going to be in this for a while. Unfortunately, I don't see any end in sight. Now, some kind of major market shift, major recession like we had in 2008 could certainly, and we don't want that. We don't want that to be the reason for it to slow down. But I think it's going to be a while. I just don't have a crystal ball to know when. But I'm anticipating at least another year to 2 years of this. And then you have to look at things like information technology, like how it's been like this in IT for probably 15, 20 years, where there's just, not enough Java programmers and developers. So then you have to rely on a whole assortium of like staffing firms and global companies, consulting companies to get things done. I hope it doesn't stay like that permanently. I really don't think it is. There's so many people getting into supply chain. Like I mentioned earlier, 6 universities taught it when I started recruiting in this space over 2 decades ago, and now there's 150. But unfortunately, it's just going to take time to close that generational gap that we're dealing with. And then it's going to take a lot of times for companies to make these big paradigm shifts as they evaluate their supplier bases. I mean, everybody's hiring sourcing professionals, continuous improvement professionals. Every area is hot right now, and they're just trying to put a more resilient supply chain in place. So those are creating new jobs. Technology is advancing. That's creating new jobs. And it's just the perfect storm, like I talked about earlier. And I think it's going to be here to stay for at least a little while. Hinesh, Mike, do you have any perspective on top of that, or did you think?
I might toss in one other. I mean, we're hearing a lot about automation, and not just the kind where robots or things are moving stuff around because you're not finding the people who do the work on a warehouse floor in a manufacturing facility, but it's the process automation. There's a lot of companies out there that have developed software that you can run through the cloud that have really been able to figure out some ways to be able to automate some more, I'd say, white collar and administrative kinds of tasks as well. And that great acceleration, we talked about the great renegotiation, the great resignation, the great migration, but it's also sort of the great acceleration overall of all kinds of different things that are going to help make this problem be solved a little faster. But we've thrown a big rock in the pond, and it takes a while for the waves to die down.
Yeah, that's a great addition there. The automation is going through the roof, but it takes time. There's not enough people to implement these solutions with everybody shopping online and all the warehouses that are being built. There's a 500,000 people shortage just in the distribution centers. And so, the only way to solve that is through automation, or people need to start having a lot more babies to bring into the workforce. That's not going to happen. That doesn't solve anything for a good 18 years, right? So anyway, that's a good point. I think automation will help solve it, but all of these things take time to make those shifts, and we're probably going to be in this for a while, but we're here to help. And the next part 2, we are going to cover more of the nuts and bolts as it relates to. So these are more programs you put in place. we're going to kind of get into more of that, especially on the talent acquisition side and ways you can improve your applicant pool. So we hope you can join us for next week.
All righty. Well, thanks for the answers, guys. I think that puts a wrap on it.
All right. Thanks everybody for attending, and you'll get a copy of this replay. Obviously, you've got the 3 job posting slots that you can use. There's the code that you can put in. You just go to the job board at supplychaincareers.com, and you'll get a copy of the supply chain hiring guide that we put together. We've had that for a few years. We continuously improve it to match the time. So a lot of the material we covered is in the guide. Check it out. Feel free to email us too if you have any questions. Again, rodney.apple@supplychaincareers.com. Thank you, and we hope to see you next week.